Oops.
Welcome to Con Carolinas. This is the He's Dead Jim panel. I would like to start with all of my awesome panelists telling you why they're here and what is their number one beef with bad medicine and science fiction and fantasy.
I am Faith Hunter. I spent 40 years in the laboratory medical field in a little tiny hospital back in the day when there were lots of crossovers between different fields of expertise. So I've done a little bit of everything in the ER and have helped with postmortems and surgical procedures. And so I have a little bit of knowledge about a lot. And I also write books, notably the Jane Yellowrock series, the Soulwood series, and now the Junkyard Cat series.
Oh, I'm Jeannie Adams. I'm on this panel because I teach a class on body disposal for writers because I spent 13 years in the funeral and cemetery business. And so there are a lot of pet peeves there, from digging a grave by hand in the space of a few hours at night on television, burying a body in Maine in February. And I write urban fantasy. Pardon?
Without a backhoe.
Without a backhoe, yeah, with shovels. No. I write urban fantasy, paranormal romantic suspense, and straight suspense, and space opera with my friend Nancy Northcott.
Chris Jackson. I write science fiction fantasy, a little bit of paranormal fantasy, and I spent about 20 years of my life in the biomedical research business. I taught critical care medicine. I taught advanced cardiac life support. I spent a lot of time in the OR teaching medical students. And no, I'm not a doctor, but hey, I play one on TV.
I am Leanne Rattel. I am a family medicine physician by day, writer by night. I write the Chondrogic series and the Hands of Time series. I'm on this panel because obviously I'm a family physician, and during our training, we rotate through about every specialty there is. And so, you know, we used to say we were cradle to grave, but I say we take care of people diaper to diapers.
I'm Darian Kennedy, and I too am a family physician, and I write these things, and I'm here because I am notorious at conventions for going into my whole Oliver Queen has died 43,000 times. And he finally, after I think 7 seasons, has shuffled off this mortal coil, but now he's an immortal ghost, and one won't go into that. So we'll start with my first question. What is the most egregious example in either literature or movie or television that you've ever seen where you were like, what? Go ahead.
Oh, Lord. Probably in some of the HBO 6 Feet Under and Pushing Daisies, their depictions of funeral homes. Just, I couldn't even, I'm sure it's like that for people who are watching ER, who are medical people. That and the forensic stuff in CSI, where it was like instantaneous. You turn around and, oh, look, we have DNA results, which take 6 to 8 weeks, even in the best of times.
The magical DNA machine that like pops up someone's face is one of my absolute favorites. I'm like, boy, wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, totally, but no.
I mentioned this to you guys earlier, watching the movie The Hobbit. When they're doing the chase scene through the caverns of the goblins, and dwarves are falling 50, 60, 70 feet, bouncing, getting up and running away. And I'm just like, you guys just don't really know what blunt force deceleration trauma is or how it affects a human or even a dwarf body. But yeah, anytime there's a serious impact, you know, somebody hit by a car and they just, you know, at 20, 30 miles an hour, and they just bounce right up and run away. Things like that just make my teeth hurt. It's like, you really don't know.
Can't remember the name of it, but I was reading a book series, and there's one character that is portrayed to have superhuman strength. And in literally just scene before she's fighting the main character, she reaches over with one hand and like yanks this guy's arm clean off. Obviously that's hard to do, but we go, okay, they're super strong, they can do this. But then this woman turns around and punches the main character in the face, and she just has like a mild concussion. And I'm like, if that lady is strong enough to rip a guy's arm off by just kind of going, if she punches you, your face is like, you know, Gallagher watermelon, and you're gone.
There was this one scene in a movie which shall remain unnamed, where the main character says, all right, you're going to have to make it look real. So just shoot me in the shoulder. Just shoot me in the shoulder. So they shot him in the shoulder. And maybe 5 minutes time subjective, this main character is running through the forest with his wounded shoulder. Like this, gets to the edge of a cliff and leaps off and reaches up and grabs hold to a helicopter, which is off the ground, and he swings back and forth with his shot shoulder, and he climbs up into the helicopter and he beats the bad guy.
That would be that would be a little difficult.
And stupid. Impossible. Yeah. He's dead, Jim.
Right.
He is dead, Jim. So
there was a serious "He's Dead, Jim" at the end of Calvin and what is it? Not Calvin and Hobbes. It's
I was going to say Calvin and
Shaw.
Hobbes. Calvin and
Hobbes
Hobbes
and
must
Shaw.
have gotten really dark.
Yeah, really. Hobbes and Shaw.
Oh, okay.
And they slide the helicopter down like 30 feet of cliff, and it crashes and burns, and everybody gets up and starts fighting. I'm like, no.
Now what I desperately want to see is the latest movie in that franchise, Calvin and Hobbes and Shaw. I think that would be fantastic. Since Oliver Queen finally has died, I'm going to have to shift my my ever rotating thing of "You've Got to Be Kidding Me" over to The Flash, because I'm watching it this week, and the latest version of Mirror Master is this Eva McCulloch woman, and she shatters a mirror, and then there's all these shards on the ground, and then she telekinetically hurls them at Barry and fills his body with shards of glass like this. So I brought a prop, if it stays in the screen, and there's one that's like, no lie, this big, and it's sitting in his shoulder like that. Then her husband is behind him, and so she wants to make a really big show of it. So what she does is she pushes the mirror shards straight through Barry's body and out the back and into her husband and kills him. So I'm like, so there's not a scapula in Barry Allen's body, because there's a big flat bone that piece of glass just went through. Number two, it's pretty cool. I didn't know that Barry had an alternate route of getting blood from his heart to his arm, because if you have a blade that's this big going literally straight through, I mean, it literally goes straight through, and he's not vibrating or phasing or doing that thing where stuff passes through him. He's sitting there wounded on the ground, and I'm like, so you just severed his brachial artery and he's dead.
Bleeding out.
He's
Right.
actively, and so I was like, when Oliver Queen died, the last thing he did is turn to Barry Allen and goes, I grant unto you, Barry Allen, the ability to survive ridiculous physical circumstances. When we all write what we write, what is one of the ones where you've had a challenging thing, you wanted to do something interesting to somebody, but you wanted to not kill them, but it was kind of challenging because what you wanted to put them through would probably kill a person. How did you go about not killing them?
I have the advantage of working primarily in a world where there's magic, and horrific wounds can be quickly healed. As the physicians here will testify, unless it's a serious blunt force trauma, most people die from bleeding out, either internally or externally. So I've done things like penetrating chest traumas, spear or bullet wounds. And the weird thing about the human body is it's not only just really super fragile in some ways, it's amazingly resilient in others. You know, I've seen radiographs of people with penetrating traumas, and bullet wounds are different because bullet wounds are kind of a combination of penetrating and blunt force because the hydrostatic shock goes through the human body and scrambles a lot of things. But like arrow wounds, spear wounds, even sword wounds, if they're straight, can do amazing things, look horrible, but be survivable if they don't sever any major bleeding arteries. So like a through and through chest wound that can lacerate a lung. Yeah, I've had people pull through from that. Not that they didn't collapse immediately and start coughing blood, but that somebody could extract the arrow and then get a healing potion or some kind of magic to heal the wound and stop the bleeding before they bled out. Yeah, I've done that before. But yeah, horrific wounds like that are sometimes amazingly survivable, but you know, not serious blunt force trauma, or like you said, there's a piece of glass or something, you know, that is your arm's almost severed and then they use the arm. No.
I have had a character where I have imprisoned her, and she has been starved and also not given water for 3 days, and she is on the brink of death but gets to go to the infirmary in the magical world, and so they're able to reverse that. And but I tried to make it scientific, like, you know, the healer was adding potassium and other, you know, things to it as well, and so a way to, you know, heal that. But it's probably about the closest I was like, if I go any longer than 3 days, she's not going to survive anyway. So that's about as close as I pushed it.
Most of my worlds are magic, so that kind of gives me leeway that's not really fair. But I wanted Lady Fontenot to almost die in one of the early Jane Yellow Rock books. And so I used an existing magic in a different way and brought her back. Not the same. She came back vastly different, but I was able to bring her back. And then, of course, there's the mistake I made where I killed Adriana twice and brought her back twice and didn't know I'd done that because I forgot. And so I had to create an entire new timeline, which invested the last 8 books of the series with an entirely different premise, and that was such a mess and so stupid. But one thing I was able to do in the Junkyard Cat series, because there's no magic and more tech, I was able to take a very badly wounded soldier and put him in a warbot machine that can be used in space, and it's essentially for ships that don't have anti-gravity of any form, and they're just, this is, you know, fairly soon to be future. So they have, what he was able to do was to be put into this warbot suit, and the parts of his memories that were missing were filled in with an implant and all of the data that was uploaded, and the missing limbs were able to be attached by the I got a wave. The missing limbs were able to receive impulses from the brain and operate 6 limbs. And so I put him essentially damaged and nowhere near himself inside a warbot suit and hooked him up to it. And he was able to survive a whole lot of things he shouldn't have been able to survive because of that. So I don't think I exactly answered the question. I kind of skewed around it.
Well, most of mine are also magic, but I pretty much beat people up a lot, and I like to make sure that they show their wounds and bruises. The one thing I've always respected the Indiana Jones movies for is when he gets the hell beat out of him, he's bruised, he's bloody. But the most probably stringent thing I did to somebody was electrocute them, and mildly. But my character survived that because he was a mage. So again, magic lets you do some things that you can't normally do.
I tend to stick in more fantasy worlds than I do in science fiction worlds, just because it does give you that out, and you can be a little bit meaner to your characters whenever you have a way to fix them that's not completely unfeasible. It was interesting listening to Face Thing. I think the science fiction solutions versus the fantasy solutions, they can overlap a little bit because, you know, magical healing versus dropping you into a robot suit, those are different. Those are different versions of sort of the same writing technique. And they have that old saying that any technology that's sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic anyway. While we're talking about tech, I'm always amazed, kind of like what Jeannie was talking about with the Insta DNA, like, hey, that was Darren Kennedy's DNA, and my face appears on the screen. I'm like, why do they have a picture of me assigned to my DNA somewhere? But that's neither here nor there. What is your, when you're watching a show or a movie or reading something and they use a piece of tech and you'll be like, that's not how that works. And the one that always gets me is the hyperbaric chamber. And my friend Melissa Boris always loves to hear me go off on hyperbaric chambers, but I'll never forget, it was on like the first or second season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and they take Skye and they basically fill her with lead and they're like, she's bleeding out, quick, hurl her into a hyperbaric chamber so we can keep her alive until we can operate. And I was kind of like, so now all the blood that is pooling inside of her body instead of being in her circulatory system has more oxygen in it. She's still dead. So
it's not a stasis chamber, it's hyperbaric.
Yeah, a hyperbaric chamber, and the thing that they stick you in Aliens movies to keep you alive as you go across light years of stuff, those are not the same thing. You know, you can survive the bends with a hyperbaric chamber, but you're not going to survive the lead. What's a piece of tech you've seen used in a movie or TV show that you're like, right?
Well, the one that always kind of gives me headaches is nanites. You know, nanites fix everything. We'll just inject these nanites and they'll cure all of his diseases, you know, obliterate cancer, heal all of their wounds. Okay, even if nanites were that programmable and could do these things, the energy to do them has to come from somewhere. Just regenerating tissue, they have to get energy from somewhere. So it's just one of those. It was like the transporters on Star Trek. Anytime they wanted a plot device to fix something, they stuck it in the transporter and descrambled it. It came out the other side fine. And so, yeah, when they stick nanites in somebody's veins and, oh, he's all better all of a sudden, or somebody's been, you know, some superhuman killing machine has been filled full of nanites so that they can take amazing trauma and just shrug it off or immediately heal and things like that. It's like, where's the energy for that coming from? So yeah, my pet peeve when it comes to science, you know.
I would say in the MCU universe, with the Black Panther series, they have that metal, and I can't remember the name of it.
Uranium.
Yeah. But because of this one metal, they can make all these tech things. And I'm like, how does one metal allow you to do all of that? And also, you know, kind of same thing with, you know, the nanites when, you know, like Robert Downey Jr. has his suit and he like hits a button and it all comes out. And I'm like, where did all the mass go? You know, like you have to have the mass of it and you can't come, you know. So I have an issue with that. I mean, I get it's supposed to be, you know, Robert Downey Jr. is like super smart, but I'm like, we don't have that tech yet. And so unless we got some alien tech that they didn't really talk about.
You're going to have to ask the question again. I got lost in everybody else's wonderful answers. What?
So it's something to the effect of what is a piece we've sort of covered in fantasy. You can magically heal people, and that allows us to beat them up a little bit more. And you've answered it from your own fiction that you utilize a sort of a robotic, like almost like a cyborg attachment to sort of bring somebody back. But in watching things where they use a piece of technology, this is probably more like in the either current fantasy sci-fi or in the near future, where they use a piece of technology and you're kind of like, that's not how that works.
It happens so often that it's really sad. But what, if I can if you'll let me, I'll flip that on its head.
Sure.
Say, what is something that we put into a science fiction series or a near future series, And we said, this can't be done. And now we can. And it's nowhere near 2050 or whatever. I have a real problem with people of science and people who are writers together, both saying, this is not going to change. This is always going to be this way. When new technology comes in all the time, and it changes everything. And it terribly, terribly dates our books. And so people who are doing the near future, I really like it when they take some leeway, but not as much leeway as they want to. And I see that in my own writing. I see that on movies that were wonderful in the 90s, and their phones are this big, a big antenna going out the top. I think it's a really hard balance to be a writer and want to do something and not have the tech person there or the scientist there to say, you can't do that, but you could do this. So I didn't specifically answer your question. I went off on a tangent. Sorry.
Well, one of the things for me that always makes me completely crazy is partly what Faith is talking about, where, you know, you've futured something and tech catches up more quickly than you have said it would, or it goes in a completely different direction. I mean, who would have ever thought iPods, iPhones, you know, that started a whole revolution, and nobody really saw that except maybe phasers and communicators. But one of the things that gets me all the time is when you talk about forensics and they show something in a small town and they're sending off DNA tests and doing all this stuff. And, you know, getting away with murder is easier in a small town or in a rural community.
Sure.
Why? Because you've got a coroner rather than a medical examiner in 90% of the states. And, you know, they don't have that technology. So it's sort of akin to what Faith was saying, is that we advance technology in our books, which is great, but we also need to account for the fact that in some areas, they don't have even 21st century technology to work with. So that's the stretch for their budgets. So that's one of the things that always gets me. It's like, oh yeah, we're in rural Minnesota and we've got a DNA kit right in our handy pocket.
And
We're
we
going to
can
swap
fix it.
for that.
And we can run it back in our police station.
Exactly, that has 3 police officers.
Right.
No detectives.
Another one of my pet peeves when I watch shows, movies, is that I don't know which show started this. It might have been Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where Willow could do everything. And then it got worse on Smallville when Chloe could do everything. And then I don't know if it got absorbed by the cop shows from the superhero shows, or if it got absorbed by the superhero shows from the cop shows. But there's always the one person in the group who is the science person. And if they need to be a pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon that week, good. The next week, if they need to be an expert in biomechanics of praying mantises, good. And what are examples you've seen where you're either watching something or you're reading something and you're like, you know what, that person is very, very smart, but there's no way on God's green earth they knew the words that just came out of their mouth?
I will say Grey's Anatomy. I've watched that since it came out. It's not sci-fi or fantasy related,
Right?
but medical.
Yes, it is.
Well, this is true, yeah. But so much of that aggravates me because, you know, no matter what stage they are in their training, and then now most of them are attending, they all they run their own blood work and they personally take patients down to get their imaging, and they sit there while they're getting their CAT scan that immediately comes up. And I'm like, we have lab techs that, you know, phlebotomists that get the blood. We have the, you know, respiratory therapists that do the breathing treatments. We've got the radiologist and the rad techs that do all that. And that aggravates me. And, you know, again, it'll be like, oh, I'm a pediatrician, but then now all of a sudden I'm doing, you know, fetal surgery, or, you know, and then even just the residency itself is so aggravating because, you know, you don't pick, you know, like, I'm a surgeon and like 1 week I'm going to be in plastics and the next week I'm going to be in cardiothoracic and the next week I'm going to be general. Or next week I'm going to be ortho, and I just get to pick. Like, that's not how that works. So that just aggravates me. I could go on and on. But
My memory of that particular, exactly what you're talking about, is whenever I was a third-year medical student, and I had the I had the dubious distinction of going through med school at exactly the same time that ER was a television show. And so I still have my, I'm not a doctor yet brain, but I have my, I'm becoming a doctor brain. So I'm right in the middle. And I specifically remember thinking the episode where Mark Green basically took care of a pregnant woman with preeclampsia who's doing her best to die in the ER. And she's down there for a good 36 hours. And Mark took care of her the whole time. I'm like, did he ever go home? I don't know that we work 36-hour shifts. Number two, if you can find an ER doctor in the United States who will keep someone who is actively trying to die with preeclampsia in their ER longer than 43 seconds, I want to go meet that person, because they're like upstairs now. And so that was the biggest one I ever saw, was like, why in the world is an ER physician managing this person longer than about 20 minutes? You know, get them upstairs.
A pregnant woman walk in the ER with a cold and they're like, go upstairs.
Right. Yeah.
No, not it.
Yeah. I love my ER docs, but they are the kings and queens of not it. Treat them and street them as what they generally are taught.
Yeah, I am thinking back to Bones, the TV show. The scientist guy on there who was, no one knew, but he was really fabulously wealthy, and then he lost all of his money, but he was super smart, and he knows everything, and he can tell you which part of the forest this pollen comes from that they found inside the body, and he can also tell you the entire life cycle of this odd fly that they found on the body, and then he can tell you what kind of mold this is that they found on the body, and he can talk about all the different species of fish by the size of their bite marks that ate on the bodies. And it was so annoying because he knew everything, and that's exactly what you were saying, and that's exactly who I thought of when you said that question was, oh, that guy. Yeah, I know that guy.
I think they had one where somebody was rolling down a hill, and they were like, well, the first thing we encountered was this mold, which was in this person's yard, but underneath that thing of mold was this type of dirt, which was in this person's yard. And they were able to determine the person that killed him was 3 houses up because they rolled through all 3 of the yards. And I was like, y'all could figure out in what order people got dirt on their clothes. I thought that was pretty fascinating.
Oh gosh, those overclocked characters. That's what my son calls them. He says, they're overclocked, Mom. My sister was an ER nurse and an oncology nurse, and she would just shake her head. You know, she's like, we don't know that stuff. You know, we don't know about the rare Indian disease that's only in one province of one section of the country of India, and this person could possibly have gotten it through contact. She's like, we don't know that shit. So, yeah, those characters always make me crazy. I particularly bothered me. You mentioned it, Darren. It particularly bothered me on Buffy that suddenly, you know, Quiet Willow knew thermonuclear physics, and then from one week to the next, then she knew, you know, the intimate details of the operating room and how a thoracic surgery be performed. I'm like, really?
The really interesting thing is on each of those shows, whoever is the science person has godlike hacker abilities and can hack into the FBI. Oh, am I stealing your thing, Chris? Go.
Yeah, you're stealing my thunder.
Go, Chris. Go.
So yeah, just about any time they do hacking, I am not a computer anything, but a dear friend of mine was he recently passed away, but he was one of the top computer science, IT, security people in the world. He ran DEF CON 4 years. He was on the people that actually ran the challenges for DEF CON, which is the world hacking competition. So anytime you see somebody with a screen in front of them and there are lines of code going by, screens and screens and screens of code, and we can get in this way, and that's just not how it's done. And they crack super encryption like it's like walking through a screen door. I'm sorry, you know, that has nothing to do with medicine, but that's one of my pet peeves. It's like, that's not how it works.
I want one of those little gadgets that they have that you walk up, you plug it into any keypad, and then it goes, and then it lets you in. Where do I get one of those? Because
Or
that
a
would be
speed
awesome.
drive that you can pop into a computer and it immediately hacks into the system. It's like, if that were real, there wouldn't be a secure computer in the world. Of course, you can virtually hack any computer, but it takes time and it takes a lot of energy, and usually a team of half a dozen people.
I want the thing from Terminator 2 where he stuck the thing in the ATM and it was like, shit, and he got all kinds of money. I was like, I want that.
Hey,
One of
can I
those.
get one of those, please?
One of the ones that cracked me up, though, in sort of the reverse is when Pepper Potts in the first Iron Man is going in and she's trying to download the file from Tony's computer, and it's taking forever. And all I could think was, yeah, been there. That was one place where they actually got it right,
Really?
She can't get in. She can't find the file. Once she does, it's like, okay, can it download now? Can it download now? And then she nearly gets caught. I thought at least they did an appropriate job with that part of the movie.
And yet, we're in the position now, and where things are changing in tech so fast.
Right.
So we have to be really careful, or you're back to the takes forever to download, maybe at a time where it won't take forever to download.
True.
We limit ourselves and we limit our readership, our evergreen possibilities, when we don't make tech a little better than it is now.
Sure.
Rock started out with a flip phone. So I've limited the people who are kids who've never seen a flip phone because this is what they have, or something fancier. And I think we have to be really careful about limiting everything, including how quickly hackers will have an ability to do.
Yeah, not just hackers, but biotechnology, gene splicing, and all
It's
kinds
going
of.
to be faster.
I'm doing this right now with a series I'm doing with Falstaff, the Dragon Dreams trilogy. So, not to, no spoilers, but there's subversive people who have biotechnology skills and abilities that's way ahead of what governments have. So, but they've kept it secret because it's amazingly powerful, and you start splicing in genes that make, phenotypic changes. That's a doable thing if you have the right technology.
So it sounds like the group consensus is don't have it be so far out there that it seems completely infeasible, but at the same time, if we wanted to live in the modern day world with the stuff that we actually have, we would just walk outside instead of reading a book or watching a show. So somewhere in the middle is the correct answer. It sounds like the group consensus. Would everyone agree?
Yes.
The one I was heading in a direction with the hacking, Chris. The one for me was on Buffy, Willow can hack better than anybody. On Smallville, Chloe can hack better than anybody. On The Flash, Cisco can hack better than anybody. And I always wanted to watch the show where you had Willow and Cisco and Chloe, and they're all trying to hack each other. And they're like, wait, I'm the best hacker in the world. No, I'm the best hacker in the world. No, I'm the best hacker in the world. And I want to watch that episode because I think that would be awesome. Because apparently they're all better than the umpteen million hired hackers of the United States government or whatever corporation they are trying to hack into that particular week.
Well, and the thing that's crazy about it too is there's never a consequence for that. Nobody ever gets caught. Nobody ever gets backtraced. Nobody ever gets arrested because, that's illegal.
Right.
But they're that good. They're that good.
They're that good. Yeah.
Nobody can backtrace them. Yeah.
So I'm always like, if I become a superhero, I'm not going to worry about my costume or thing. The first thing I'm going to do is, who is my person with the headset back at the comms who is like keeping my PG-13 anatomical part alive during my mini adventures. We're closing in, but I have another question. So I have like keywords whenever I'm watching a show or a movie that let me know that the thing that's about to be said is BS. For me, it's the word antidote. I can't tell you how many times you give somebody a poison and they go, this poison will kill you in 24 hours. Then they put a little timer at the bottom of the screen. It starts doing a countdown, and you're watching the show, and like, we have to get an antidote before this thing gets to zero. And inevitably, the person has like 23 seconds left to live, and they either drink or inject them with the antidote, and then miraculously, with no negative physiologic consequences, this person is fine. And everybody on the show is like, man, if we had given that to them 23 seconds later, they would be like so dead. So, and that always just makes me want to go, that's not how poisons work. For me, it's antidote / cure. Anytime it's antidote or cure, and especially if it's something that didn't have an antidote or cure at the beginning of the 1 hour long episode, that's what always makes my eyes roll out of my head. Yeah. Do you have like a word or a trigger that whenever you hear the next words out of this character's mouth are going to be false?
You mean, do I use a 4-letter word when it happens, or do I have a word that leads me to know that it's about to happen?
I would like to know the answer to both those questions.
PG, I'm sorry, PG, we can't do that. It's not particularly polite. But yeah, editor, because hopefully the writer wouldn't have done that. And the editor comes back and says, wouldn't it be cool if, and the writer goes, that's not supposed to happen. No, this is supposed to be this way. And the editor goes, no, we're going to do it this way. I think it makes a better story, editor, because I think most writers do at least make an attempt to find out if something could possibly work before they do something incredibly stupid. And then the editor adds to it and adds to it and adds to it on TV until it's so bizarre. It's impossible.
They have an entire series of these videos, and it's the same guy on both sides of the table, but he's playing both the writer of a movie and the producer of the movie. And the producer of the movie is always making him make things more and more and more ridiculous. I watch those all the time, and they're just brilliantly funny. And it's exactly what you're talking about, of just taking the original idea and making it so ridiculous.
Oh my gosh, the trigger word for me is quarantine. As we can all see is by what we're going on now. They say, oh, we're going to have to quarantine these people. And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And the way that it ends up, people are immediately cooperative, and they immediately go into lockdown in some facility which is already ready and already prepared and already airtight, and there are people in garments that are appropriate for the setting. And I'm like, that's actually my trigger word. Wait, lockdown, quarantine? Yeah, that's going to happen in 23 seconds, and everybody's going to be safe, and it's not going to spread. And unfortunately, germane to our current world situation.
I was going to say, can you give us an example from modern history that illustrates your principle?
My point would be illustrated by the current conditions in the United States of America.
Nice.
Yeah, that one always gets me. There's a show that's on one of the, I think it's Netflix. It's called Lockdown.
Uh-huh.
And they're quarantining like 5 city blocks, right? Something like that. And you can see in the shot that outside of the cordon, there's like traffic going by constantly. And I'm like, yeah, that worked out real well, didn't it?
There's a couple, a graze. It's just a graze. It's just a flesh wound. Yeah, for obvious reasons. I don't know if any of you have been seriously injured in any way, shape, or form, but pain, is incapacitating. People who are injured tend to writhe around a lot and scream. People who get these grazes, and there's flesh hanging off their arm, and they just go about their business like it doesn't hurt at all. I've been injured multiple times, and it's hard to concentrate on anything when you've lost a body part. You're staring at it going, there's supposed to be something at the end of that finger, and it's not there anymore, and it hurts like a bloody blue blazes, and I can see bone, and it's mine. That's a stunning thing, and unless you're used to getting shot at all the time, soldiers, for instance, people see it all the time, but having it happen to you, it's incapacitating. So yeah, these people that just go about their business when they're all shot up or with a broken bone or things like that, it's just a flesh wound. Mm-hmm. Have you ever had your flesh wounded?
Because it's not fun.
So it's not really a trigger word, but it's when, like in TV and movies, and they're going to show a sequence, and it's like there's no dialogue and just music, and it just kind of flows from one thing to the other. So they're like, we don't know why this would happen, so we're just going to breeze through it and just show you really fast, and then at the end you'll get it. And like one that it gets me a lot is in Doctor Strange at the beginning when he's the neurosurgeon, and you have all the things, and he's starting the surgery and he's doing the scrubbing of the hands, which is great, all good. And then he puts his mask on, and I'm like, no, now you need to go scrub again, because he was sterile, and then he touched his face, which is not sterile because he hasn't washed his face. So and so that whole sequence is like, la, 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 la. We don't really know how we're supposed to scrub, but we know we wash hands and we put on a mask, and then we go, and we got the order wrong. And that really just gets me every time with that movie.
I remember watching many different shows where the doctor has got on gloves and then goes and administers to about 10 different people. And I'm like, admittedly, that's another thing that we're seeing in our daily existence in the grocery store, but physicians should know better. So,
or the mask that's down here.
Right.
We can see the nose. I'm like,
right. The only person that gets to wear the mask like this is the Shadow from the 1930s radio serials, but everybody else, please, up here, your nostrils also do air. I was thinking about this morning. That's like only rolling up 3 of your windows on your car during a rainstorm. Not gonna quite do what you want. Any parting thoughts from my awesome panelists?
If you don't know it, don't just flub it. Find somebody who does know it. I've had some of the, like for instance, the computer thing. My wife is a PhD, and so a lot of the science and Gen X things. Look for a resource. That's why they invented the internet. You know what I mean? So find an expert. You're not an expert. Find one. Consult with one.
I'm a physician by trade, but I wrote a story where the main character was a medical examiner, which I am not. So I befriended one, and I said, hey, let me run some things by you. So even if it is your field of expertise, just realize you might not know everything about everything.
Because like we've already covered, just because you're a medical doctor does not mean that you are simultaneously a family physician, a pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon, an expert in pulmonary pathology. You don't know everything.
Mm-hmm. And your character's not supposed to know everything either. Your character is supposed to have to do research. That's a part of character development. Your character develops when your character learns new things. If they already know everything, they develop. So remember that the learning process is a part of the book too, or the novel, or the short story, or the TV show. Learning that stuff is pretty important. Tapping into your character, tapping into their own network. It's important.
I'd second both of those in that most of the time an expert likes to talk about what they do, and they really want you to get it right.
Right.
With apologies to Supernatural, and they're digging graves all the time in the dark within a space of a couple of hours in dirt that's not been disturbed for 50 years. A funeral director would love to chat with you most of the time, or somebody at a cemetery. Most of the time they're just waiting, they're not working. So it's easy to get those details right. And I sort of second what Faith says, is your character is learning too. It actually makes it more interesting for the reader to know how they came by that information. And it doesn't make it seem like it's, the magical, ooh, I know everything. Like Chris said, there are people out there who would love to talk with you, and you can find them on chat rooms and in the internet. And there's always an author like Darren and Leanne who are also physicians who can tell you stuff. There's somebody like me who knows stuff about funerals and body disposal, or somebody like Chris and Faith who knows stuff about science and technology in that respect. It's not hard to come by if you go looking. Don't just wing it.
And most of the time your friends who are writers are willing to help.
Yeah.
I had AJ Hartley call a few weeks ago and say, or PM'd me and said, do you know anybody who does postmortem? I said, yeah, hang on, I'll make a phone call. And I made a phone call, and 10 minutes later, they were talking about postmortems. And so your writer friends will make an effort to help you if you.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. One of
Well,
my favorite things to do is to help out people who are trying to write like a nautical fantasy, to just get the sailing details right. You know, and it's not hard, and you don't have to go into nautical speech or sailor speech or, God forbid, pirate talk to get it right. And it's you know, it's not hard. And you know, I've actually been in rooms where people have said, well, yeah, just throw out some stuff and it's okay. No, it's not. It's so easy to get it right. So yeah.
Well, I think too, and what I found is if there's things that I don't know about, and I've asked other experts, it also then makes the story a lot deeper and more interesting, and can go in ways that I hadn't imagined on my own. So it makes for a better story.
You can find me at my website, www.jeannieadams.com. You can find me on Twitter at Jeannie Adams, or on Instagram at JPA Griffin.
Yeah, the easiest place to find me is my own website, which is Jax Books with an X, JAXBooks.com. And from there you can read books, read short stories, go just about anywhere. And there's links to my social media pages. I'm on basically Facebook and Twitter is about all I do. But yeah, my Twitter feed is primarily my writing stuff, and Facebook, I go everywhere. So that's where you can find me, Jax Books.
You can go to my website at leannembertel.com. Also on Facebook and Instagram mostly. My stuff's on Amazon.
I am at faithhunter.net, not faithhunter.com. Faithhunter.com is a gorgeous, extraordinarily limber yoga instructor who is young and fabulous. So faithhunter.net. And I do most of my fan interaction on Facebook, because I can stand Facebook and turn it off when I want to. So I just go hunt for Faith Hunter writer or Faith Hunter author, and you'll eventually find me on Facebook.
And I'm Darren Kennedy, and I'm at darrenkennedy.com, and I'm around on Facebook and Twitter, and occasionally post pictures of cool plants on Instagram when I see something particularly pretty on my walks. So thank you very much to my awesome panelists, and I look forward to seeing y'all on some future panels, and hope everyone has a great day.